In this video, I want to talk to you about preparing data for your pivot table. I'm just going to create a pivot table quickly just to show you what's happening with this particular set of data. Let's say I'm going to pop my product in my axis and I'll have this time total cost in my values area. Now it seems to have worked and it's produced a chart, but take a look at this table and I'll tell you what the issues are. Can you see carrot cake appears to be there twice? Cheesecake appears there 3 times with slightly different spellings. And I'll tell you what it is. The data in the original source has not been typed in identically. I'll put money on the fact there's a space in one of those carrot cake headings which doesn't exist in the other one, and that's enough for Excel to think it's a totally different row label. So what we need to do before we can do our pivot table is we need to fix the data. So I'm just going to delete this pivot table. We'll come back to it in a minute. And it's this column here that's potentially my problem. So what I'm going to do is copy and paste that column into a fresh sheet here so that I can do something called deduping, where you're basically taking out the duplicates, so I can see where there are issues. And it's on your data tab. There's a little blue and white stripy button called remove duplicates, and there's only one column in this case, so I can just say okay to this little message. And can you see it's gone 89 duplicate values were found and removed, 9 unique values remain. Note that count may include empty cells, spaces, etc. Now this is probably the issue. Let's go and have a look at this one. Chocolate cake appears here. I'll tell you what I'll do is I'll sort them alphabetically as well. So you can see, chocolate cake appears here, but it also appears for some bizarre reason down here. Now I'm willing to bet it's because this fellow has an additional space in it. And probably this one does too, maybe in a slightly different location. And these ones have just been spelled incorrectly. So what I would do is I would go through and tidy up and make sure that I've only got one version of it. Now, one thing you can do, there is a function called trim. I'm going to try that and see if that will help my data. If I go to my formulas tab, there's a whole load of functions that are about text. Whether you want to make your text uppercase or you want to make your text lowercase, etc. And there is one on this list somewhere. There he is, called trim. And this is saying removes all spaces from a text string except for a single space between words. So it won't take out the space between chocolate and cake, but if there are any spaces before or afterwards, or if there were additional spaces in the middle, it will remove those. So the text that I want to trim is whatever the name of my cake is. And if I copy that all the way down. Now, the only trouble with Excel is because this is a value, if I try to delete this previous column, let me show you what happens. Because it's looking at that column to create a formula, I'm going to get this ref error. So what I'm going to do before I get rid of the previous column is I'm going to do a copy and paste special, and I'm just going to say I just want the values, please. So it's not a formula anymore, it's just whatever the text is. So now I can safely delete this column. Now I'm going to try that dedupe again and see if that's improved the situation. So I'm going back to the data tab and back to my remove duplicates. And now I've ended up with 8 unique values. So, you know, we had several versions of chocolate cake last time. It's because they had spaces in various different places. It's managed to get rid of those for me. Now, the cheesecake, it can't really do anything about, because you need to be a human to know how to spell cheesecake, I suppose. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to manually delete the rows where I think people have spelled cheesecake incorrectly. Red velvet, again, I kind of need a bit of human intervention here. So I'm going to say I'm going to get rid of, sorry, that should have been delete, not insert. There we go. So now I've ended up with 4 unique types of cake. if you see what I mean. Now, the other issue is I've cleaned it up for now, but what about all these instances here? When somebody adds a new record onto my database, they could potentially still make a mess of it. So what I want to show you next is how to make a little drop-down list so that when you enter your data, you enter it from this selection. And it's something called data validation. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to insert a column here, and we'll do the data validation on a separate column. So I'll call it, I don't know, product new. Now, before I start the data validation section, my recommendation would be to set this up as something called a named range. You don't have to, but it helps, makes life a lot easier for you because you're giving it a sensible name. It will always look at that specific range. Now, you can just highlight the range that you want to name, and this little box here is your name box, and I'll just call it cake. And then what I can ask this sheet to do is look at that list so that when people add a product in, instead of randomly typing it in however they like, they have to choose one of the options that I've selected. Now, I'm just going to select the area where I want the data validation to go. Let's say down to here. You could do it for the whole column if you wanted to by just clicking onto the A at the top of the column. Actually, we'll try it that way and see how that works. And then I'm going to go to data. And you know where we found the little blue and white stripey remove duplicates option? Just underneath that, or depending on your screen layout, it might be just to the right hand side. There's an option called data validation. And when I go into data validation, it's at the moment saying allow any value. So you can just restrict the values to make sure it's a number, make sure it's text, make sure it's a date, which if you are later on going to turn this into a pivot table or a pivot chart, it's really, really helpful because it makes sure people put in the right type of data. But for this one, I'm going to choose an option called list. And the source of my list is actually this little area here, but actually you could have just typed in equals cake and it would have worked. Or if you like keyboard shortcuts, when you're at this point, you can just press the F3 key, or if you've got a laptop where you have to switch into the function, it's usually function F3, and then any of the named ranges that you've set up will appear on that list and you just choose the one that you want. So if there's lots of different names and you might get confused, probably that's an easy way of doing it. There is an option called input message. I don't think you necessarily need an input message. I think people are used to using drop-down lists, so I wouldn't worry about that too much. The one that's important is the one called error alert, because the default for error alert is an option called stop, which will stop people typing in any data that you haven't specified on your list, which in this case is what we want because we don't want people to misspell products. But in some cases, you might want to allow them to overtype options that are not on the list, in which case there are options to set it as a warning or an information box instead. But for ours, we want to restrict it, so we'll keep it set to stop. And I'm just going to put a friendly little error message in. Well, not too friendly. Let's say not in list. I'm going to say please choose cancel and pick product from list, and you'll see what I'm talking about if I get an error. Now, if I try to click into any of the cells in this column now, I can pick my cake from the list, which will work swimmingly. If I try to type, if I type CH, can you see it's going, oh, do you mean chocolate cake or cheesecake? So you don't need to pick from the list. If you've got hundreds of products, you might just want to type the first few characters and then it'll find that particular option for you on the list. Let's see what happens if I type something that isn't there. Let's say, I don't know, lemon drizzle. And I type lemon drizzle and it goes, oh no, it's not in the list. Please choose cancel and pick the product from the list. So I'm going to choose cancel. And obviously lemon drizzle isn't there. But if I wanted to add it on, it's not too difficult to do. I'm going to go back to my original sheet. Now, if I were to type lemon drizzle at the bottom here, it would not include it in the range name and you'd have to reset your range name. But I'm going to cheat slightly and I'm just going to insert it where it would appear alphabetically, if you see what I mean. So if I go insert shift cells down, I can sneak lemon drizzle in here. And then when I go back to my data sheet, lemon drizzle has appeared automatically on my list. Come back for the next video where I will show you how to do a lookup. So when people choose the cake type, it will automatically fill in the cost per unit.